Alexander Graves slammed his Italian leather briefcase onto his desk with enough force to make his assistant jump. He didn't have time for this wedding nonsense. As CEO of Graves Enterprises, his schedule was packed with meetings and million-dollar decisions that actually mattered. But his sister Olivia had been insistent. If he was going to be her man of honor at her wedding, he needed to learn how to dance properly. Not just swaying awkwardly like he did at corporate functions, but actually dance. "Yates, this is ridiculous," he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. "I don't have time to take dance lessons. I'm in the middle of the Anderson merger." Yates Blackwell, 34, millionaire, and completely out of his element, stared at the business card his assistant had placed on his desk. Rhythmic Soul's dance studio was printed in elegant script, along with an address in the artsy part of downtown that he rarely visited. "Your sister scheduled your first lesson for tomorrow at 7, his assistant replied, unfazed by his boss's irritation. "She says if you miss it, she'll tell everyone at the wedding about the time you got stuck in the tree house when you were 12 and cried until your dad came home." Yates groaned. His sister knew exactly how to back him into a corner. "Fine. Put it in my calendar, but reschedule anything that conflicts. This merger is worth $80 million. The following evening, Yates pulled his Aston Martin into the small parking lot behind Rhythmic Souls. He was 15 minutes late and not remotely apologetic about it. The building was a renovated warehouse with high ceilings and exposed brick, trendy, but not what he was used to. The reception area was empty, so he followed the sound of music down a short hallway. The main studio space was flooded with warm light from industrial fixtures hanging from the ceiling. Mirrors lined one wall, and a polished wooden floor gleamed beneath his Italian loafers. In the center of the room, a woman moved with fluid grace to classical music playing from hidden speakers. She was alone, eyes closed, completely absorbed in her movement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing the elegant line of her neck. She wore simple black dance attire, fitted top and flowing pants that accentuated her lithe figure as she executed a perfect turn. Yates cleared his throat. The woman stopped abruptly, opening her eyes. They were a striking hazel color that shifted to green as she turned to face him fully. "You're late," she said simply. "I had important business to attend to," he replied, not bothering to apologize. "And I have a business to run." She walked over to a small table and pressed a button on her phone, silencing the music. "You must be Mr. Blackwell. Your sister warned me you might be difficult." Yates bristled. "And you are Victoria Donovan, owner of Rhythmic Souls and your instructor for the next 6 weeks." She extended her hand. "If you still want lessons, that is." Her grip was firm, her palms slightly calloused, the hands of someone who worked for a living, not soft like the hands of the women he usually associated with. "Let's get this over with," he said, setting down his briefcase and removing his suit jacket. Victoria crossed her arms. "That's not the attitude that's going to get you through a waltz at your sister's wedding without embarrassing yourself." "I don't embarrass easily, Miss Donovan." "It's just Victoria, and we'll see about that." She gestured to his outfit. "You should have worn something comfortable. Those shoes will scuff my floor." Yates glanced down at his $1,000 loafers. "These are Italian leather. They're still inappropriate for dancing. For next time, bring comfortable clothes and proper shoes. I'll work with what we have today, but you're already at a disadvantage." "I don't do disadvantages," Yates said, rolling up his sleeves. Victoria's lips quirked slightly. "Everyone has disadvantages, Mr. Blackwell, even millionaires." Yates raised an eyebrow. "You've been researching me. Your sister mentioned you own some tech company. I looked you up." She shrugged. "Standard practice with new clients." "And what did you find?" That you're very successful, very rich, and according to business magazines, very difficult to work with. She moved to the center of the room. Shall we begin? The first lesson was humbling. Yates prided himself on his quick learning and physical coordination, but Victoria made him feel like a clumsy teenager. She demonstrated steps with effortless grace, then watched critically as he attempted to mimic them. "You're too stiff," she said, demonstrating again. Dancing isn't about precision and control. It's about feeling the music, connecting with your partner. "I'm excellent at precision and control," Yates countered, frustration evident in his voice. "I'm sure that serves you well in boardrooms." Victoria stepped closer. "But this isn't a boardroom. Here, you need to let go a little." She positioned herself in front of him, taking his right hand in her left and placing his other hand on her waist. The contact was professional, but Yates felt oddly aware of the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her top. "Now follow my lead," she instructed. "Shouldn't I be leading?" he asked. Victoria looked amused. "Not until you know what you're doing." For the next 45 minutes, she guided him through basic waltz steps. Her instructions were clear and concise, her patience seemingly endless as she corrected his posture, his hand position, the way he held his shoulders. "You're overthinking," she said after he stumbled for the third time. "Dancing is as much instinct as technique. Feel the rhythm." By the end of the hour, Yates had mastered the basic box step, but felt more exhausted than after his morning workouts with his personal trainer. Dancing was apparently more physical than he'd anticipated. "That's all for today," Victoria said, stepping away and breaking their connection. "You did adequately for a first lesson," Yates frowned. "Adequate isn't a word I hear often. I imagine not in your world, but in mine, honesty is more valuable than flattery." She walked to the small table where her phone lay. "Same time next week." "My assistant will confirm," Yates replied, retrieving his jacket. He felt oddly dismissed, which was an unfamiliar sensation. Usually he was the one ending meetings. Victoria nodded. "Your sister prepaid for 6 lessons. I'd recommend practicing in between, but somehow I doubt you will." Yates slipped his jacket on and picked up his briefcase. "You don't know me, Miss Donovan." "It's Victoria," she corrected again. "And no, I don't. But I've taught enough busy executives to recognize the type. You see this as an obligation, not an opportunity." "What opportunity would that be?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "To learn something new, to step outside your comfort zone, to connect with another person without words or agenda." Yates found himself momentarily speechless. There was something disarming about her directness. "I'll see you next week, Victoria," he finally said, turning to leave. "Wear proper shoes," she called after him. As he drove back to his penthouse apartment, Yates couldn't shake the memory of Victoria's hand in his, guiding him across the floor. It had been a long time since anyone had guided him anywhere. The following morning, his assistant placed a package on his desk. "What's this?" Yates asked, not looking up from his computer. "Dance shoes. Your sister ordered them. She said to tell you that, if you show up to your next lesson in loafers, she'll add the treehouse story to her wedding toast." Yates sighed and pushed the box aside. He had more important things to focus on than dancing and Victoria Donovan's disapproving gaze. But that evening, after everyone had left the office, and the city lights twinkled outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, Yates found himself standing in his spacious office, attempting to remember the steps Victoria had taught him. Without her hand to guide him, he felt even more awkward than he had in the studio. His phone rang, interrupting his solitary practice. It was Bradley, his best friend and best man at Olivia's wedding. "How were the dance lessons?" Bradley asked, amusement evident in his voice. "A waste of time," Yates replied, sitting down at his desk. The instructor treated me like I was an incompetent child. Bradley laughed. Sounds like someone finally stood up to the great Yates Blackwell. Is she cute, at least? Yates hesitated. She's not what I expected, meaning she's professional and apparently very good at what she does. Yates found himself reluctant to discuss Victoria in terms of her appearance, which was unusual for him. He and Bradley often appraised women they met at social functions. Interesting, Bradley said, drawing out the word. You're being evasive. That's new. I'm not being evasive. I'm being focused. The Anderson merger is taking all my attention right now. Right, the merger, which is why you answered my call at 9 o'clock at night instead of working. Yates ignored the observation. Did you need something, or are you just calling to annoy me? Actually, yes. Olivia wants us all to meet on Sunday to go over some wedding details. Brunch at her place. Yates groaned. Can't you go in my place? I need to prepare for Monday's board meeting. Nope, she was very specific. Drag him away from that office if you have to, her words, not mine. After hanging up, Yates found his gaze drawn to the box containing the dance shoes. With a sigh, he opened it. The shoes were simple black leather with suede soles, nothing like his usual Italian footwear. He slipped them on and stood, feeling oddly vulnerable in his suit and dance shoes. Squaring his shoulders, he attempted the box step again, counting under his breath as Victoria had taught him. By the end of the week, Yates had practiced enough to feel moderately confident that he wouldn't completely embarrass himself at his next lesson. He arrived at Rhythmic Souls 5 minutes early, wearing athletic pants and a fitted t-shirt, the dance shoes in a separate bag. Victoria was already there, arranging chairs along one wall. She looked up when he entered, surprise briefly crossing her features. You're early, she said, setting down the last chair. I'm punctual for things that matter, he replied. Victoria tilted her head slightly. And this matters now. My sister would never let me hear the end of it if I made a fool of myself on her wedding day. Victoria seemed to accept this explanation. You brought proper clothes. Good. She nodded toward a door at the back of the studio. You can change in there. When Yates returned, Victoria was queuing up music on a small sound system. Her hair was in the same neat bun as before, but today she wore a deep blue top that made her hazel eyes appear more green than brown. We'll review what we covered last week, then add turning, she said without preamble. Yates positioned himself in front of her, taking her hand and placing his other hand on her waist without prompting. You've been practicing, Victoria observed as they began moving through the basic steps. I'm a quick learner. There's a difference between learning quickly and practicing diligently. You've done both. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. I'll admit, I didn't expect that. You made assumptions about me, Yates said, surprised by how the idea bothered him. As you did about me, Victoria countered. Let's call it even and move forward. The lesson progressed more smoothly than the first. Yates found himself less focused on getting the steps right and more aware of Victoria as his partner. She moved with a natural grace that made even simple steps look elegant. Your posture is much better today, she commented as they practiced turning. But you're still thinking too much. Feel the music. I'm more of a logical person than a feeling person, Yates admitted. Dancing requires both. The logic is in the steps, but the feeling is what makes it beautiful. Victoria adjusted their position slightly. When was the last time you did something just because it felt good, not because it was productive or profitable? The question caught Yates off guard. I enjoy my work. That's not what I asked. Yates considered for a moment. I went sailing last summer with friends. And did you spend the whole time checking emails and making calls? Yates's silence was answer enough. Victoria's expression softened. Try something for me, Close your eyes. What? Just try it. Close your eyes and just feel the movement, the music. Feeling somewhat foolish, Yates complied. With his vision removed, his other senses heightened. He became more aware of Victoria's hand in his, the slight pressure as she guided their movements, the scent of her perfume, something subtle and floral. "Don't count," she said softly when he began to mutter numbers under his breath. "Just move." For a few moments, Yates allowed himself to simply experience the dance without analyzing it. The music seemed to flow through him, and their movements became more fluid, more connected. When he opened his eyes, Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Better," she said, and for some reason, the simple approval made him feel unreasonably pleased. The rest of the lesson passed quickly. Victoria introduced more complex turns and steps, but now that Yates had found a better connection to the music, he picked them up more easily. "You're a natural when you get out of your own way," Victoria said as they concluded the lesson. "I'm still not sure this will be enough for the wedding," Yates admitted. "Olivia mentioned something about a first dance with all the wedding party." Victoria considered this. "We could add an extra lesson if you're concerned, or I could come to one of the wedding rehearsals to help everyone." "You do that. It's my job," Victoria replied simply. "I want all my clients to succeed." As Yates changed back into his regular clothes, he found himself wondering what Victoria did when she wasn't teaching dance. Did she have a partner who appreciated her grace and directness? Friends who knew the person behind the professional exterior? These weren't thoughts he typically had about service providers in his life. His trainer, his tailor, his housekeeper, they performed their functions well, and he paid them accordingly. He didn't wonder about their lives outside of their interactions with him. When he emerged, Victoria was scrolling through her phone, a small line between her brows. "Problem?" he asked, surprising himself with his interest. She glanced up. "Just a scheduling issue, nothing important." Yates found himself reluctant to leave. "Do you have another lesson now?" Victoria shook her head. "Not until this evening. I was going to use the time to choreograph for a community performance next month." "You perform as well as teach, sometimes." "I was with the City Ballet Company until an injury sidelined my professional career." Teaching turned out to be surprisingly fulfilling. Yates nodded, processing this new information. "You must have been very young when that happened." Victoria smiled slightly. 24. Ancient for a ballet dancer, actually. Many retire by 30. "And now?" "Now I'm 29 and own my own studio. Life takes unexpected turns." She slipped her phone into her bag. "I should get back to work, of course." Yates hesitated, then asked, "Would you be available for that extra lesson this weekend?" "I have that wedding brunch on Sunday, and I'd like to be prepared if Olivia springs any surprise dance requirements on me." Victoria consulted her calendar. "I could do Saturday morning. 10 o'clock, perfect." Yates picked up his bag. "I'll see you then." As he drove to his office, Yates realized he was looking forward to Saturday's lesson more than he would have expected. Dancing with Victoria challenged him in ways that his usual activities didn't, and there was something refreshing about her straightforward manner. His phone rang, and his assistant's voice came through the car's speakers. "Mr. Blackwell, the lawyers for the Anderson merger have sent over revised terms. They're waiting on your desk." And just like that, Yates was pulled back into his real world of deals and negotiations, where every minute was accounted for, and relationships were transactional. Saturday arrived with unexpected anticipation. Yates found himself at Rhythmic Soul's 15 minutes early, having already changed into his dance clothes at home. The studio was quiet, but the door was unlocked, so he ventured inside. Victoria was at the far end of the room, stretching on a mat. She wore fitted leggings and a loose tank top over a sports bra, her hair in a messy bun rather than her usual neat one. Without her usual teaching attire, she looked younger, more casual. She looked up as he entered. "You're early again. This is becoming a habit." "I had a light morning," Yates replied, setting down his bag. Victoria stood and walked over to the sound system. "I was thinking we could try something different today. The waltz is essential for the wedding, but learning another style might help you feel more comfortable with dancing in general." "What did you have in mind?" "Salsa. It's more rhythmic, less formal. Sometimes people who struggle with ballroom find Latin dances more intuitive." Yates raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I'm struggling?" Victoria smiled. "I'm saying variety is good for learning, and salsa is fun." Fun wasn't a word that featured prominently in Yates's vocabulary, at least not in recent years. His life was structured around achievement and success, not enjoyment for its own sake. "I'm here to learn whatever you think is best," he said, surprising himself with his compliance. Victoria looked equally surprised. "Well then, let's start with the basic step." Salsa was indeed different from waltz, more energetic, more expressive. The movements required a looseness in the hips that felt foreign to Yates, but Victoria was a patient teacher. She demonstrated each step multiple times, occasionally placing her hands on his shoulders or hips to adjust his position. "You need to relax here," she said, her hands lightly touching his waist. "Let the movement flow from your center." Yates was acutely aware of her touch, brief and professional though it was. He couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him without agenda, not as a business associate with a handshake, not as a lover with desire, just a simple human contact meant to guide and help. "I think I've got it," he said, demonstrating the step. Victoria nodded approvingly. "Much better. Now let's try it together." She put on music with an infectious beat, then positioned herself in front of him, taking his hands. The salsa hold was different from the waltz, more interactive, with frequent hand changes and turns. "Follow the rhythm," Victoria instructed. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. Yates found himself smiling as they moved across the floor. There was something liberating about this style of dance, less formal, more expressive. "See, fun," Victoria said, reading his expression. "You're allowed to enjoy things, you know." "I enjoy plenty of things," Yates protested. "Name 3 things you've genuinely enjoyed in the past month." "And work doesn't count." Yates thought for a moment as they continued dancing. "Dinner with my sister last week. A book I just finished about economic theory in developing nations." "That's 2, and I'm questioning the second one," Victoria said, executing a turn under his arm. Yates caught her smoothly as she returned to the basic position. "These lessons," he said finally. "I've enjoyed these lessons." Victoria missed a step, quickly recovering. "Well, that's good to know." They continued dancing for another hour, Victoria introducing new steps and combinations as Yates mastered the basics. By the end of the lesson, they were moving together with a synchronicity that felt almost natural. "You're a quick study," Victoria said as they took a break to hydrate. "Salsa suits you." "I had a good teacher," Yates replied, watching as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Victoria glanced at the clock. "We still have some time. Should we review the waltz for the wedding?" Yates nodded, and they moved back to the center of the floor. The waltz felt different now, more familiar, but also more intimate after the energetic salsa. "You're much more relaxed today," Victoria observed as they moved through the steps they'd practiced in previous lessons. "Your whole demeanor is different." "Is that good?" "It's interesting." Victoria looked up at him, her hazel eyes thoughtful. "You're not what I expected, Yates Blackwell." "What did you expect? Someone more entitled, less willing to learn?" Yates considered this. I can be entitled, he admitted. I'm used to being the best at what I do. But I also recognize expertise when I see it. You clearly know dancing in a way I never will. Never say never, Victoria replied. With enough practice, anyone can become proficient. Proficient isn't the same as what you do, Yates said. When you dance alone, like you were that first day, that's not just skill, that's something else entirely. Victoria seemed caught off guard by his observation. You saw that, before you noticed me. You were completely absorbed in the music. A slight flush colored Victoria's cheeks. That's just habit from years of training. It's more than that, Yates insisted. It's passion. The word hung between them, suddenly charged with meaning beyond their discussion of dance. Victoria stepped back, breaking their hold. We should end for today. You've made excellent progress. Yates felt an unexpected disappointment. Right, I should get going anyway, work to do. On a Saturday, Victoria asked, gathering her water bottle and towel. The business world doesn't observe weekends, Yates replied with a shrug. Victoria studied him for a moment. That sounds lonely. The simple observation struck Yates more deeply than he would have expected. Was he lonely? He was surrounded by people all day, employees, business partners, social acquaintances, but meaningful connections. Those were fewer than he cared to admit. I'm used to it, he said finally. Victoria's expression softened. Being used to something doesn't mean it's good for you. Before Yates could respond, Victoria's phone chimed. She glanced at it and sighed. Everything okay? Yates asked. Just a reminder about a fundraiser I'm organizing. One of our major sponsors pulled out, and I need to find a replacement by next week. She slipped the phone into her bag. Sorry, not your problem. What kind of fundraiser? For our community outreach program. We provide free dance classes for underprivileged kids. The annual showcase helps fund it for the year. Victoria zipped up her bag. I'll figure it out. Yates found himself saying, I could help. Graves Enterprises has a substantial philanthropy budget. Victoria looked up, surprise evident on her face. I wasn't fishing for a donation. I know that, Yates said, but I'm always looking for worthwhile causes to support. It's good business and good community relations. Dance classes for kids who can't afford them is good business. Arts education has demonstrable benefits for academic performance and social development, Yates replied. And yes, being associated with community initiatives is good for my company's image. But mostly, I think what you're doing matters. Victoria studied him as if trying to determine his sincerity. I don't mix business with clients. Consider it completely separate from our lessons, Yates suggested. Send the proposal to my office. I'll have my assistant set up a meeting with our foundation director. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, that's unexpectedly kind. I'm capable of kindness, Yates said, feeling oddly defensive. I'm beginning to see that. Victoria smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Same time next Thursday for our regular lesson. I'll be here, Yates promised, surprised by how much he was looking forward to it. The following day, Yates found himself at his sister's apartment for the wedding brunch. Olivia's fiancé, Mark, was a good man, a pediatric surgeon who clearly adored her. Their relationship had always seemed easy and natural to Yates, who had never experienced anything similar in his own life. You seem different, Olivia said, cornering him in the kitchen as he refilled his coffee. Less stressed. The Anderson merger is going well, Yates replied automatically. Olivia rolled her eyes. I meant personally, not professionally. You're smiling more, am I? Yes, and you haven't checked your phone once since you got here. She leaned against the counter. Are you seeing someone? Yates nearly choked on his coffee. What? No. Then what's going on? You've been different the past couple weeks. Yates considered deflecting but knew his sister would persist. "I've been taking those dance lessons you insisted on. They're not terrible." Olivia's eyes widened. "You're enjoying dance lessons with Victoria." "She's a good teacher," Yates said carefully. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. "She's also single, you know." "Olivia," Yates warned. "What? I'm just providing information." She raised her hands innocently. "I've known Victoria for years. We were in the same ballet company before her injury. She's amazing, talented, dedicated, completely no nonsense." "Sounds like someone I'd hate," Yates said dryly. "Or someone who'd be perfect for you," Olivia countered. "When was the last time you dated someone who wasn't impressed by your money or status?" Yates didn't answer, which was answer enough. Olivia squeezed his arm. "Just something to think about. Now come on, we need to discuss the rehearsal dinner." The rest of the day was filled with wedding details that Yates found tedious but endured for his sister's sake. By the time he returned to his penthouse that evening, his thoughts had circled back to Victoria. Olivia's comments had stirred something in him, a curiosity, perhaps, or a recognition that his dance instructor was becoming something more than just a service provider in his life. Monday morning brought a surprise. Among the documents on his desk was a proposal from Rhythmic Soul's dance studio, addressed to the Graves Foundation. Victoria had taken him up on his offer more quickly than he'd expected. The proposal was professional and thorough, detailing the community program's impact, budget, and needs. Victoria had included testimonials from parents and teachers about how dance had positively affected the children involved. The amount requested was modest $50,000 to fund a year of classes, costumes for the showcase, and transportation for the children. Yates forwarded it to his foundation director with a note to expedite the review process. Then, on impulse, he did something he rarely did. He picked up the phone and made a call himself, rather than having his assistant do it. Victoria answered on the third ring. "Rhythmic Souls, this is Victoria." "Victoria, it's Yates Blackwell." There was a brief pause. "Yates, is everything all right? Did you need to reschedule our lesson?" "No, nothing like that. I received your proposal this morning." "Oh." Her tone shifted to something more formal. "That was fast. I only sent it yesterday evening." "I have an efficient assistant," Yates replied. "The proposal looks excellent, very comprehensive." "Thank you. We've been running the program for 3 years now, so we have good data on outcomes. I've forwarded it to our foundation director, but I wanted to let you know personally that I'm recommending approval for the full amount." Another pause, longer this time. Thank you, Yates. That will make a huge difference for the kids." "I'd like to see the program in action sometime," Yates found himself saying. "If that's possible, of course. The children have classes on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You're welcome to observe anytime. Thursday before our lesson, perhaps. That would work." Victoria's voice had a warmth to it that Yates found himself wanting to hear more of. The kids would be excited to meet a real millionaire. Yates chuckled. "I don't know about that. Most children aren't impressed by business success. You'd be surprised. Many of our students have big dreams. Meeting someone who's achieved success could be inspiring." After hanging up, Yates sat at his desk, contemplating the call. It had been purely professional, discussing a foundation grant, but something about it had felt different from his usual business interactions. There had been an ease to their conversation, a personal element that was typically absent from his workday communications. The week passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. The Anderson merger was entering its critical phase, and Yates found himself working later than usual, going over financial projections and market analyses. But despite the pressure, he found his thoughts occasionally drifting to Thursday afternoon, and his upcoming visit to Victoria's community class. When Thursday arrived, Yates made sure to leave his office by 3, something that caused his assistant to look at him with undisguised surprise. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked as he gathered his things. "Everything's fine, Margaret. I have a foundation site visit this afternoon." "But you never do site visits yourself," she pointed out. "That's what the foundation staff is for." Yates paused. "I'm making an exception today. Please reschedule anything that comes up, and I'll be unreachable until tomorrow morning." Rhythmic Souls looked different in the afternoon light. The studio was filled with children ranging from around 8 to 13 years old, all wearing simple black leotards or T-shirts with dance pants. Victoria moved among them, demonstrating positions and offering guidance with the same direct but kind approach she used in their private lessons. Yates stood at the back of the room, watching. Victoria hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on a young girl who was struggling with a particular step. She knelt beside the child, speaking softly and demonstrating the movement slowly. The girl tried again, executing the step perfectly this time, and Victoria's face lit up with a smile of genuine pride. Something tightened in Yates's chest at the sight. Victoria in teaching mode was something to behold, patient, encouraging, but also demanding excellence in a way that somehow made the children want to achieve it. A boy of about 10 noticed Yates and nudged his friend, whispering. Soon, several children were glancing curiously in his direction. Victoria followed their gazes and finally spotted him, offering a small wave before returning to the lesson. For the next 30 minutes, Yates observed the class, impressed by the discipline and joy the children brought to their dancing. Some were naturally gifted, others clearly worked hard to keep up, but all were fully engaged in a way that spoke to Victoria's skills as an instructor. When the class ended, Victoria spoke briefly with a few parents who had arrived to pick up their children, then made her way over to Yates. "What did you think?" she asked, wiping her brow with a small towel. "They're good," Yates replied honestly. "You're good with them." Victoria smiled. "They work hard. Most have natural talent that would never be developed without this program." She glanced at the remaining children who were gathering their things. "Did you want to meet some of them? They've been whispering about the man in the expensive suit since you arrived." Before Yates could respond, Victoria called over a small group of children. "Everyone, this is Mr. Blackwell. He's the one I told you about who's helping fund our program next year." The children looked up at him with varying degrees of curiosity and shyness. One boy, taller than the rest with bright eyes and a confident demeanor, stepped forward. "Are you really a millionaire?" he asked bluntly. Victoria laughed. "Marcus, that's not polite." "It's all right," Yates said, finding himself amused rather than offended. "Yes, I am, but I wasn't always. I started with much less." "Like what?" Marcus pressed. "A scholarship to college and a lot of determination," Yates replied. "And good teachers," he added, glancing at Victoria. "Miss Victoria says I could be a professional dancer someday if I keep practicing," a small girl with braids said seriously. "If Miss Victoria says so, then I believe it," Yates replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. The children peppered him with questions about his business, his car, and whether he knew any famous people, until Victoria finally shooed them away to their waiting parents. "Sorry about the interrogation," she said as the last child left. "They don't get many visitors during class." "I enjoyed it," Yates said, realizing it was true. "They're passionate about dance." "They're passionate about life," Victoria corrected. "Dance is just how they express it." She gathered her notes and water bottle. "I need to freshen up before our lesson. Would you mind waiting a few minutes?" Yates nodded. "Take your time." While Victoria disappeared into a small office, Yates walked around the studio, looking at the photos displayed on one wall. Many showed Victoria in performance, elegant in classical ballet roles, vibrant in contemporary pieces. In one, she was mid-leap, suspended in the air in a moment of perfect grace. "That was from my last professional performance," Victoria said, returning to the studio. She had changed into her usual teaching attire and reapplied her lipstick. "Swan Lake. 2 weeks later, I tore a ligament and ended my career." "You must have been devastated," Yates said, studying the photo more closely. Victoria moved to stand beside him. "I was, for a time. I'd worked toward being a professional dancer since I was 4 years old. Losing that was like losing part of my identity." "But you found teaching." "Yes, and eventually this studio." She gestured around the space. "It's not the same as performing with a company, but it's fulfilling in ways I never expected." Yates turned to face her. "You're remarkable, Victoria." The words seemed to hang in the air between them, more personal than anything he'd said to her before. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, and a flush crept up her neck. "I'm just doing what I love," she said, moving away toward the sound system. "Shall we get started? I thought we'd focus on turns today since you mentioned the wedding party dance might be more complex." The lesson proceeded as usual, but Yates was aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Their professional relationship had developed an undercurrent of something else, not quite personal, not quite professional. As they practiced a series of turns, Victoria's hand in his, Yates found himself wondering what it would be like to dance with her outside the confines of these lessons. At a real event, perhaps, where they weren't teacher and student but just two people enjoying the music and movement together. "You're distracted," Victoria observed after he missed a step. "Everything okay? Just thinking about the wedding," Yates lied. "It's coming up in a few weeks. Nervous about the dance, among other things." Yates executed a turn, bringing Victoria back to face him. "My mother has been hinting that it's time I settled down too. Apparently, at 34, I'm in danger of becoming a confirmed bachelor." Victoria laughed. "Mothers are good at applying that kind of pressure. Mine has been introducing me to nice young men at every family gathering for years." "And none of them have worked out?" Yates asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Victoria shrugged. "I've dated, but nothing serious recently. My schedule doesn't leave much room for relationships, and most men don't understand the demands of running your own business." "I can relate to that," Yates said. "My last serious relationship ended because she felt I was married to my company." "Were you?" Yates considered the question as they continued to dance. "Probably. I was building Graves Enterprises from the ground up, working 18-hour days. She wanted more attention than I could give." "And now," Victoria asked, "is your company still your primary relationship?" "It's still important," Yates admitted, "but I'm learning there might be room for other priorities." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the dance became something more intimate than a lesson. Victoria's hand felt warm in his, her body moving in perfect harmony with his steps. Then she blinked and looked away, creating a professional distance again. "Let's try that turn sequence one more time," she said, her voice slightly less steady than usual. As the lesson concluded, Yates found himself reluctant to leave. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked abruptly. Victoria froze in the act of turning off the music. "What? Dinner?" "Tonight if you're free." "Yates, I don't date clients," Victoria said, not meeting his eyes. "Is that a studio policy or a personal one?" Victoria hesitated. "Both. It's unprofessional." "What if I weren't your client? What if I were just someone you knew? But you are my client." Victoria picked up her water bottle, fidgeting with the cap. "And I'm your sister's friend. And I'm accepting a major donation from your foundation. It's complicated," Yates stepped closer. Life is complicated, Victoria. That doesn't mean we should avoid connections when they happen. Victoria looked up at him, conflict evident in her expression. I need to think about this. Yates nodded, recognizing that pushing further would be counterproductive. Of course. My offer stands whenever you're ready. The following morning, Yates received a call from the foundation director confirming approval of Victoria's grant. He called her immediately to share the news. That's wonderful, Victoria said, genuine excitement in her voice. The kids will be thrilled. This means we can expand the program to include more students next year. I'm glad we could help, Yates replied. The foundation was impressed with your proposal and the program's outcomes. There was a pause, and then Victoria said, About yesterday, you don't need to explain, Yates interrupted. I put you on the spot. That wasn't fair. Actually, I was going to say yes. Yates nearly dropped his phone. Yes, to dinner, Victoria clarified. I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. Connections are rare enough without avoiding them because of complications. Are you free tonight? Yates asked, not bothering to hide his eagerness. Victoria laughed softly. Eager, aren't you? I have classes until 7. After that, I'm free. I'll pick you up at the studio at 7:15, Yates said, already mentally rearranging his evening schedule. Nothing too fancy, Victoria cautioned. I won't have time to change into anything elaborate. Noted, see you tonight. Yates ended the call and found himself smiling. His assistant, who had entered his office with a stack of documents, raised an eyebrow. Good news, Mr. Blackwell, she asked. Yes, Margaret, very good news indeed. That evening, Yates arrived at Rhythmic Souls precisely at 7:15. He had changed from his business suit into dark jeans, and a cashmere sweater still elegant, but less formal than his usual attire. Victoria was waiting in the reception area, her dance bag slung over her shoulder. She had changed from her teaching clothes into a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual bun. You look beautiful, Yates said, meaning it. Victoria smiled. Thank you. You clean up nicely yourself when you're not in business mode. Yates had chosen a small Italian restaurant that was upscale without being pretentious. The owner, an old-world gentleman who knew Yates from business dinners, greeted them warmly and led them to a quiet corner table. This is lovely, Victoria said, looking around at the warm lighting and tasteful decor. Not what I expected. What did you expect? Yates asked as they settled into their seats. Something more. I don't know, trendy, the kind of place that's more about being seen than enjoying the food. Yates laughed. I save those places for business meetings. This is where I come when I actually want to enjoy my evening. The meal was relaxed and comfortable, their conversation flowing easily from dance to business to personal histories. Victoria told stories of her early ballet days, the rigor of professional training, the joy and pain of performance. Yates shared the challenges of building his company, the risks he had taken, the failures that had preceded his success. You never mentioned what your company actually does, Victoria noted as they shared a tiramisu for dessert. I looked it up, but the website was full of corporate jargon. Yates smiled. We develop enterprise software solutions for healthcare systems, not very glamorous but essential. Our programs help hospitals manage patient data, track outcomes, and improve efficiency. That actually sounds important, Victoria said. You're making healthcare better. That's the goal. My father was a doctor who constantly complained about the archaic systems they had to use. It seemed like a problem worth solving. Yates took a sip of his wine. What about you? Did you always want to be a dancer? Victoria nodded. From the moment I saw my first ballet, I was 4 and my mother took me to see the Nutcracker. I came home and declared I would be the sugar plum fairy someday. She smiled at the memory. I actually achieved that for one season with the city ballet. And now you're teaching others to follow their dreams, Yates observed. I'm trying to. Dance taught me discipline, perseverance, the value of hard work. Those lessons apply to anything in life. As the evening progressed, Yates found himself increasingly drawn to Victoria's passion and authenticity. She was unlike anyone he had dated before, grounded, direct, unimpressed by his wealth or status. When the check arrived, Victoria reached for her purse, but Yates waved her off. I invited you. It's on me. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, but next time I'm paying. Next time. Yates raised an eyebrow, smiling. Victoria blushed slightly. If there is a next time. I'd like there to be, Yates said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Many next times, in fact. Victoria looked at their joined hands, then up at him. This is complicated, Yates. I'm still your dance instructor. I'm still accepting funding from your foundation. There are boundaries being crossed. Life rarely fits into neat categories, Yates replied. We can figure it out as we go. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. Yates's driver waited discreetly with the car, but Yates was reluctant to end the evening. Would you like to walk for a bit? He asked, nodding toward the nearby park that was lit with decorative lights along its paths. Victoria nodded, and they strolled side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders. The park was quiet at this hour, just a few other couples and late-night joggers sharing the space. I haven't enjoyed an evening like this in a long time, Victoria admitted as they paused by a small fountain. My life is usually just teaching, administrative work for the studio, and collapsing into bed. Mine too, minus the teaching, Yates said. Work, meetings, more work, sleep for a few hours, repeat. That doesn't sound very fulfilling. It wasn't, Yates admitted. I didn't realize how one-dimensional my life had become until recently. What changed? Yates turned to face her. I met someone who reminded me there's more to life than quarterly reports and merger negotiations. Someone who made me want to learn something new just for the experience of it. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Yates, before she could continue, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, questioning rather than demanding. After a moment of surprise, Victoria responded, her hand coming up to rest lightly on his chest. When they separated, Victoria looked up at him with a mixture of emotions: pleasure, confusion, concern. That complicates things even more, she said softly. I'm okay with complicated, Yates replied. Are you? Victoria considered for a moment, then smiled. I'm beginning to think I might be. The weeks leading up to Olivia's wedding were a delicate balance for both Yates and Victoria. They continued their dance lessons, maintaining a professional demeanor during the instruction, but now each lesson was followed by dinner or drinks or a walk in the park. They were getting to know each other beyond the confines of the studio, discovering shared interests and complementary differences. Victoria introduced Yates to her world, taking him to a small contemporary dance performance, showing him her favorite bookstore with its extensive art section, bringing him to a casual dinner with her closest friends who treated him like a person rather than a millionaire. Yates, in turn, shared aspects of his life he rarely revealed to others: his passion for sailing, his secret love of classic films, his volunteer work at the children's hospital his father had once worked at. He took her to a small jazz club where the music inspired impromptu dancing, and to a charity gala where they waltzed together, no longer as teacher and student but as partners. You've been holding out on me, Victoria said after they left the dance floor at the gala. You dance beautifully when you're not overthinking it. I had an excellent teacher, Yates replied, his hand resting comfortably at the small of her back. Their developing relationship wasn't without challenges. Victoria's schedule was demanding, with classes sometimes running from morning until night. Yates was equally busy, particularly as the Anderson merger approached its final stages. They both had to make conscious efforts to carve out time together. There was also the matter of their different worlds. Victoria lived modestly in a small apartment near her studio, while Yates's penthouse occupied the top floor of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. She was careful with money out of necessity. He had more than he could reasonably spend in a lifetime. But these differences, rather than driving them apart, seemed to provide balance. Victoria helped Yates reconnect with simpler pleasures, a home-cooked meal, a quiet evening with good conversation, the satisfaction of physical exertion through dance. Yates helped Victoria see possibilities. She hadn't considered expansion opportunities for her studio, investment strategies for long-term security, ways to grow her community program beyond its current scope. A week before the wedding, they had their final official dance lesson. Yates had mastered the waltz and several other styles, more than prepared for his role in Olivia's wedding. "I think that concludes our professional relationship," Victoria said as they finished practicing the specific dance that would be performed at the wedding reception. "You're officially a competent dancer, Mr. Blackwell." Yates pulled her closer than the dance position required. "Does that mean I can kiss my former instructor now?" Victoria laughed. "I suppose there's no conflict of interest anymore." The kiss was deeper than their previous ones, filled with the growing connection between them. When they separated, Yates kept his arms around her waist. "I have a proposition for you," he said. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." "Semi-serious." "I'd like you to be my date for the wedding." Victoria hesitated. "Olivia already invited me. I was planning to attend anyway, I know, but I'd like you to attend with me officially, as my partner." Yates brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Unless that's moving too fast." Victoria considered for a moment. "It's not too fast, but it does make a statement. To your family, to our friends." "I'm okay with that statement," Yates said. "Are you?" Victoria smiled and leaned up to kiss him again. "Yes, I am." Olivia was delighted when Yates called to inform her that Victoria would be his +1. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I told Mark you two would hit it off. He owes me dinner at that fancy French place now." "You bet on us?" Yates asked, both amused and mildly annoyed. "Of course I did. I know you both too well to think you wouldn't be perfect together." Olivia's voice softened. "I haven't seen you this happy in years, Yates. It's nice." The day of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunny but not too warm, with a gentle breeze that rustled the decorations in the garden venue. As the man of honor, Yates was busy with pre-ceremony responsibilities, but his eyes kept searching for Victoria among the arriving guests. When he finally spotted her, his breath caught. She wore a deep green dress that flowed around her as she moved, her hair arranged in an elegant updo with a few curls framing her face. She was chatting with some mutual friends, laughing at something someone had said, completely at ease in a setting that would have intimidated many. The ceremony was beautiful, Olivia radiant as Mark looked at her with undisguised adoration. Yates stood beside his sister, genuinely happy for her, but he found his gaze frequently drifting to Victoria in the audience. During the reception, after the formal dances and dinner, Yates finally had Victoria to himself on the dance floor. They moved together with the ease of practice, but now there was an added dimension to their connection and intimacy that went beyond physical movement. "Your dancing has improved remarkably," Victoria said as they swayed to a slow song. No one would guess you couldn't dance 3 months ago. I had motivation to learn quickly, Yates replied, drawing her closer. I wanted to impress my teacher. Victoria laughed softly. Is that so? And did you also take extra salsa lessons with Roberto at the community center to impress me? Yates looked surprised. How did you know about that? Roberto mentioned it when I saw him last week. He said you'd been practicing your Latin dances. Busted, Yates admitted with a smile. I wanted to surprise you at the Latin night at Carmine's next weekend. Victoria's expression softened. That's incredibly sweet. As the evening progressed, they danced, chatted with guests, and shared quiet moments in the garden away from the crowd. In one such moment, as they sat on a stone bench beneath flowering trees illuminated by string lights, Yates took Victoria's hand in his. These past few months have been unlike anything I've experienced before, he said, his voice low and sincere. You've changed how I see the world, Victoria. Victoria squeezed his hand. You've surprised me too, Yates. When Olivia first mentioned her workaholic millionaire brother needed dance lessons, I expected someone very different, different, less thoughtful, less willing to learn, less capable of connection. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above. I'm glad I was wrong. Yates brought her hand to his lips. I think I'm falling in love with you, Victoria Donovan. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Yates rarely allowed himself to be. Victoria's eyes widened, then softened. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Yates Blackwell, she replied, despite all my professional boundaries and practical concerns. Yates laughed softly. We can still maintain some boundaries if you'd like. I promise not to kiss you during dance lessons. I don't give you dance lessons anymore, Victoria reminded him, leaning closer. True, which means I can do this. Yates cupped her face gently and kissed her, pouring all his newfound feelings into the connection between them. Epilogue: 1 year later, the annual showcase for Victoria's community program was being held in the city's main performing arts center, thanks to increased funding from the Graves Foundation. Backstage, Victoria moved among her students, adjusting costumes and offering last-minute encouragement. You're going to be amazing, she told Marcus, now 11 and one of the program's star dancers. Remember to spot your turns and breathe through the difficult sections. Yes, Miss Victoria, he replied, bouncing slightly with pre-performance energy. Is Mr. Blackwell here? Victoria smiled. Front row, center. He wouldn't miss it. In the year since Olivia's wedding, Yates and Victoria's relationship had deepened and strengthened. They had found ways to balance their busy lives, with Victoria expanding her studio to include more instructors, allowing her more flexible time, and Yates delegating more responsibilities to his management team. Victoria still lived in her apartment, though she spent many nights at Yates's penthouse. They had discussed moving in together, but both valued maintaining some independence as they navigated their relationship. The lights flickered, signaling 5 minutes to curtain. Victoria gave final hugs to her students and made her way to the wings of the stage. From there, she could just make out Yates in the audience, handsome in a tailored suit, engaged in conversation with one of the program's sponsors. As the house lights dimmed, Victoria stepped onto the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the showcase. She spotted Yates watching her with pride and something deeper: the love that had grown between them over the past year. Tonight's performance represents more than just dance, Victoria said, addressing the full auditorium. It represents possibility, the possibility that with support, guidance, and opportunity, anyone can discover their passion and pursue excellence. After the showcase, which was met with enthusiastic applause, Victoria joined Yates at the reception in the lobby. He handed her a glass of champagne and kissed her cheek. "That was incredible," he said. "The kids have improved so much since last year." "They work hard," Victoria replied, beaming with pride. "And now they have proper facilities thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Yates corrected. "Your vision, my resources, we make a good team." They circulated through the reception, accepting congratulations and discussing future plans with board members and sponsors. Victoria noticed that Yates seemed slightly distracted, checking his watch more than once. "Are you late for something?" she asked as they found a quiet moment between conversations. "Not late, just timing." Yates took her hand. "Would you mind stepping outside for a moment? There's something I want to discuss." Victoria followed him to the terrace that overlooked the city skyline, now illuminated against the night sky. The air was warm, scented with the flowers that filled planters along the balustrade. "What's going on?" Victoria asked, curious about Yates's unusual behavior. Yates led her to the center of the terrace, then turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "A year ago, I walked into your studio as a reluctant student who thought dancing was a waste of time," he began. "I was focused on success as I defined it: wealth, power, business achievements. I thought I had everything figured out." Victoria smiled. "And I thought you were an entitled businessman who would quit after 2 lessons. We were both wrong," Yates continued. "You showed me that true success includes joy, connection, passion, all the things I'd been too busy to notice were missing from my life." Yates released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. Victoria's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "I don't want to dance through life without you as my partner," Yates said, dropping to one knee and opening a small velvet box to reveal a beautiful emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. "Victoria Donovan, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Victoria's eyes as she looked down at the man who had changed her life as much as she had changed his. The millionaire who had taken dance lessons for his sister's wedding and ended up finding so much more than he expected. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Yates. I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, the terrace doors opened and cheers erupted. Victoria turned to see her students, Olivia and Mark, and friends from the dance community all watching and applauding. "You planned this," she accused Yates with a laugh. "Of course I did," he replied, pulling her close. "Some things are worth choreographing perfectly." Later that night, after the celebration had wound down and they were alone in Yates's penthouse, Victoria stood by the window looking out at the city, the emerald on her finger catching the light. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about that first day you came to the studio," Victoria replied, leaning back against him. "How annoyed I was that you were late, how certain I was that you were just another rich man who thought the world should bend to his schedule." Yates chuckled. "I was pretty terrible." "You were," Victoria agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "But underneath that, you were someone willing to learn, to be vulnerable, to try something new. That's the man I fell in love with. And you were the teacher who saw past my defenses to the person I could be," Yates said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The person I want to be for you." "Dance with me?" Victoria asked, a smile playing at her lips. Without music, in the soft light of the penthouse, they moved together in perfect harmony, no longer teacher and student, but partners in the truest sense, creating their own rhythm as they began the dance of their life together.